Start Hour 13. Page 405. Office of Cybersecurity, Energy Security, and Emergency Response, CISR. Mission/Overview. CISR's mission is to enhance the security and resilience of U.S. critical energy infrastructure to all hazards, to mitigate the impacts of disruptive events and risk to the sector overall through preparedness and innovation, and to respond to and facilitate recovery from energy disruptions in collaboration with other federal agencies, the private sector, and state, local, tribal, and territory governments. Needed reforms. The threats to U.S. energy infrastructure are real and persistent, and CISR's role, working to support national security by working with the private sector to ensure energy security, is a proper one for government. Though CISR is properly focused on the threat to the grid from inverter-based resources like wind and solar, it needs to focus on the entire energy system, including the interdependence between natural gas and electric generation and cybersecurity. A good first step would be to reinstate an iteration of the Trump administration's Executive Order 13920, securing the United States bulk power system. The Biden administration also placed the Strategic Petroleum Reserves, SPR, and DOE's Federal Power Act 202(c) authority under the CISR office, which should continue in the next administration. New policies. CISR should be refocused to prioritize the cybersecurity, physical security, and resilience of critical infrastructure. Through research and development, technical assistance to states and industry, and emergency exercises, CISR can make a difference in our energy security posture. Budget. CISR received $177 million for FY 2022 under the Energy and Water Development and Related Agencies Appropriations Bill 2022, 21 and $550 million through the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act. The FY 2023 budget request is for $202 million. In addition, the White House has sent a letter to Congress requesting additional appropriations of $500 million to modernize the SPR. Office of Electricity, OE. Mission/Overview. OE was created after the 2003 blackouts to improve grid reliability and energy assurance. OE works to defend and promote the reliability and resiliency of the electric grid through power grid modeling and analytics, cyber resilience programs, and coordination with private sector electricity providers. It also works to identify defense-critical electric infrastructure. Needed reforms. Focus more intently on grid reliability. There are significant cyber, physical, and reliability threats to the electric grid, and it is important that a government agency with access to national security information develops data and plans to address threats to the grid and assist the private sector in securing it. Although OE does not stand out as a problematic office, additional focus and priority could be given to its original mission of working on grid reliability and resilience. OE could be combined with CISR, as well as what is left of the Grid Deployment Office if it is eliminated. Eliminate applied programs. OE administers grant programs for things like energy storage and the testing of grid-enhancing technologies, GETs. These programs should be eliminated. The next administration should work with Congress to eliminate all DOE applied energy programs including OE, except perhaps those related to basic science for new energy technology. New policies. Prioritize grid security. OE, along with CISR if they are combined, should focus on the security of critical infrastructure equipment used in the bulk power system as envisioned in President Trump's May 2020 Executive Order 13920 and a related December 2020 Prohibition Order 26, which was revoked in April 2021 by President Biden. In addition, CISR/OE should 1. Focus on the interdependence of and threats to electric generation and natural gas pipelines. 2. Continue to focus on defense-critical electric infrastructure. 3. Work with FERC and the North American Electric Reliability Corporation, NERC, to ensure that there is sufficient dispatchable on-demand generation available to generate the electricity the grid needs when intermittent generation like wind and solar is not available. End funding of programs for commercial technology and deployment. The next administration should work with Congress to eliminate non-essential funding of commercial technology and deployment. These activities can be conducted by the private sector. Budget. OE's FY 2021 enacted budget was $211,720,000, and DOE has requested $297,386,000 for FY 2023. Office of Nuclear Energy, NE Mission/Overview. The Office of Nuclear Energy's mission is to advance nuclear energy science and technology to meet U.S. energy, environmental, and economic needs. It has 5 stated goals: enable continued operation of existing U.S. nuclear reactors, enable deployment of advanced nuclear reactors, develop advanced nuclear fuel cycles, maintain U.S. leadership in nuclear energy technology, and enable a high-performing organization. Under the Nuclear Waste Policy Act, 30, the Office of Nuclear Energy has also been responsible for the DOE's statutory requirements to collect and dispose of spent nuclear fuel since the Obama administration's dissolution of the Office of Civilian Radioactive Waste Management. Needed reforms. NE is too influential in driving the business decisions of commercial nuclear energy firms. Instead of focusing on a limited set of basic research and development activities that solve foundational technical issues that apply broadly to energy production, NE intervenes in nearly all aspects of the commercial nuclear energy industry. Absent wholesale reforms that restructure the federal energy and science bureaucracy to eliminate such functional energy offices, the next administration should substantially limit NE's size and scope. Adopt broader regulatory and energy policy reforms that reduce regulatory obstacles, allow all energy sources to compete fairly in the marketplace, and establish a predictable policy environment. This will avoid unfair bias against the nuclear industry. New policies NE should transition to a more limited scope of responsibilities that focuses on basic research, solving broadly applicable technology challenges, and solving the nuclear waste management issue as it relates to the development and deployment of advanced next-generation reactors, which can include small modular reactors, SMR. While respecting existing contractual obligations, NE should not initiate any new civilian reactor demonstration and commercialization projects. NE also should focus on overcoming technical barriers that are preventing commercial reactor demonstration projects from moving forward. Any activities in support of existing nuclear plants and any other projects directed toward commercialization, including licensing support, should be shouldered by the private sector. Reorganize its remaining activities into 3 basic lines of responsibility: nuclear fuels across the fuel cycle, reactor technology, and civilian radioactive waste. Budget the above reforms would cost substantially less than the $1,675,060,000 requested for FY 2023. Legislation such as the IJ placed additional funding for new reactor demonstration projects outside of NE. These responsibilities and their associated funds should be moved to NE as appropriate. NE should not simply add or subtract programs, as some programs may help to support NE's new priorities. The better approach would be to build a new budget and program strategy that accounts for related DOE programs and submit a new budget request reflecting NE's new priorities. Office of Fossil Energy and Carbon Management, FECM Mission/Overview. DOE is authorized by law to increase the conversion efficiency of all forms of fossil energy, reduce costs, improve environmental performance, and increase the energy security of the United States. In recent years, the Office of Fossil Energy, FE, has been transformed from its statutory role of improving fossil energy production to one that is focused primarily on reducing the carbon dioxide emissions from fossil fuel extraction, transport, and combustion. This change is reflected in the office's new name, the Office of Fossil Energy and Carbon Management, FECM, effective as of July 2021, and FECM's mission to minimize the environmental impacts of fossil fuels while working towards net zero emissions. Needed reforms: eliminate carbon capture utilization and storage, CCUS, programs. Despite the recent expansion of the 45Q tax credit for carbon capture utilization and storage, CCUS, to $87 per ton, most carbon capture technology remains economically unviable. Although private sector innovations are on the horizon, CCUS programs should be left to the private sector to develop. If the office continues any CCUS research, that research should be focused more on innovative utilization. Pursue the processing of critical minerals. Development of domestic critical material sources is important for national security, as the vast majority of critical materials are mined or processed, or both, in Russia and China. The processing of critical materials from fossil fuel waste products, primarily coal, has shown some potential and, in view of our vast domestic reserves of coal and abundant waste from coal mining and combustion, should be pursued. New policies: eliminate FECM. The next administration should work with Congress to eliminate all of DOE's applied energy programs, including those in FECM, with the possible exception of those that are related to basic science for new energy technology. Taxpayer dollars should not be used to subsidize preferred businesses and energy resources, thereby distorting the market and undermining energy reliability. Rename FECM, if it cannot be eliminated, under its original designation as the Office of Fossil Energy and with its original mission, increasing energy security and supply through fossil fuels. Focus on energy security and supply. Absent elimination of FCM, Congress should direct FCM appropriations toward increasing energy security and supply. Congress has already directed these goals, including the reduction of costs. Ensure that LNG export approvals are reviewed and processed in a timely manner. In particular, 1. Ensure that LNG export applications are reviewed and approved expeditiously. 2. Maintain the categorical exclusion from the National Environmental Policy Act, NEPA, 38 for LNG exports that was established by the Trump administration, or, if it is revoked by the Biden administration, reinstate it. 3. Work with Congress to expand automatic approvals to include allies such as NATO as well as nations that have free trade agreements with the U.S. Strategic Petroleum Reserve, SPR. The Biden administration moved responsibility for the SPR to CSR. Regardless of where the responsibility lies, the new DESs should ensure that the SPR is maintained for national strategic purposes and not misused for political gain. Budget: the FY 2023 budget request for FCM was approximately $893.2 million. FECM's requested appropriation can be compared to the more than $4.0 billion requested for the Office of Energy Efficiency and Renewable Energy. The disparity in funding demonstrates how DOE's research activities and substantial portions of its organizational structure are now focused entirely on the reduction of CO2 emissions rather than energy access or energy security. Office of Energy Efficiency and Renewable Energy, ERE Mission/Overview. The Office of Energy Efficiency and Renewable Energy traces its roots to the Energy Policy and Conservation Act of 1975, 42, but most of its programs today are rooted in the Energy Policy Act of 2005. Under the Biden administration, ERE's mission is to accelerate the research, development, demonstration, and deployment of technologies and solutions to equitably transition America to net zero greenhouse gas, GHG, emissions economy-wide by no later than 2050, and ensure that the clean energy economy benefits all Americans. The office is made up of 3 pillars: energy efficiency, renewable energy, and sustainable transportation. Needed reforms, and the focus on climate change and green subsidies. Under the Biden administration, ERE is a conduit for taxpayer dollars to fund progressive policies, including decarbonization of the economy and renewable resources. ERE has focused on reducing carbon dioxide emissions to the exclusion of other statutorily defined requirements such as energy security and cost. For example, ERE's 5 programmatic priorities during the Biden administration are all focused on decarbonization of the electricity sector, the industrial sector, transportation, buildings, and the agricultural sector. Eliminate energy efficiency standards for appliances. Pursuant to the Energy Policy and Conservation Act of 1975 as amended, the agency is required to set and periodically tighten energy and/or water efficiency standards for nearly all kinds of commercial and household appliances, including air conditioners, furnaces, water heaters, stoves, clothes washers and dryers, refrigerators, dishwashers, light bulbs, and shower heads. Current law and regulations reduce consumer choice, drive up costs for consumer appliances, and emphasize energy efficiency to the exclusion of other important factors such as cycle time and reparability. New policies. Eliminate ERE. The next administration should work with Congress to eliminate all of DOE's applied energy programs, including those in ERE, with the possible exception of those that are related to basic science for new energy technology. Taxpayer dollars should not be used to subsidize preferred businesses and energy resources, thereby distorting the market and undermining energy reliability. Reduce ERE funding. If ERE cannot be eliminated, then the administration should engage with Congress and the House and Senate Appropriations Committees on ERE's budget. ERE's budget was around $1.5 billion a year when the advances were made that led to dramatic cost decreases in wind, solar, and battery technology. In recent years, Congress has appropriated many billions of dollars in excess of ERE's normal budget. DOE requested more than $4.0 billion for FY 2023. It should rescind these excess monies so that DOE is not required to spend them. If funding cannot be reduced, then it should be reallocated to more fundamental research and less toward commercialization and deployment. Focus on fundamental science and research. If ERE cannot be eliminated, then the administration should focus on broader and more fundamental energy research, consistent with law. The Biden administration is too focused on deploying technologies instead of relying on the private sector. Moreover, under the Biden administration, ERE is too focused on decarbonization and not at all on the cost of energy. Eliminate energy efficiency standards for appliances. The next administration should work with Congress to modify or repeal the law mandating energy efficiency standards. Before, or in lieu of, repealing the law, there are steps the agency can take to refocus on the consumer by giving full force to the provisions already in the law that serve to limit regulatory overreach and protect against excessively stringent standards. For example, the Trump DOE prioritized the relatively few appliance regulations that were likely to save consumers the most energy and refrained from those whose modest benefits are unlikely to justify the costs. It also took steps to ensure that any new standards do not compromise product quality or eliminate any features. These and other consumer protections are in the statute but have often been ignored. Budget. ERE was funded at slightly more than $2.8 billion in FY 2021, and DOE requested slightly more than $4.0 billion for FY 2023. Congress needs to rescind the appropriated monies that ERE has not spent and begin fresh with new appropriations. Grid Deployment Office, GDO Mission/Overview. The Grid Deployment Office was established to implement parts of the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act. Pursuant to the IJ, GDO administers funds appropriated by Congress to support transmission expansion and low/zero carbon resources. In addition, GDO is developing studies of the electric grid to address congestion, enhance reliability and resilience, and promote clean energy. Needed reforms, end grid planning and focus instead on reliability. FERC and NERC have the primary responsibility for addressing reliability. States have the primary authority to site and permit transmission lines, and regional transmission organizations assist in planning regional transmission needs for parts of the country. But Congress granted some grid planning and siting authority to FERC and DOE through the Energy Policy Act of 2005 and IJ, as well as grid funding through the Inflation Reduction Act. Instead of focusing on grid expansion for the benefit of renewable resources or supporting low/carbon generation, GDO should be incorporated into the reformed Office of Cybersecurity, Energy Security, and Emergency Response, which would work to enhance the grid's reliability and resilience. To the extent that they remain in effect, the funding programs that GDO oversees and administers should emphasize grid reliability, not renewables expansion. Consider whether to defund the Civil Nuclear Tax Credit Program and hydroelectric power efficiency and production incentives established in the IJ and administered through GDO. If subsidies for renewable resources are not repealed, it may be necessary to continue subsidies for nuclear and hydro to ensure grid reliability. New policies: eliminate GDO and assign necessary activities to the reformed CISR. It appears that GDO's current purpose is to promote the integration of low/zero carbon resources onto the grid by supporting subsidies for such resources and building new transmission facilities at a cost that poses a barrier to renewable generation expansion. However, some of the grants that it administers under the IJ appear to be properly focused on enhancing the reliability and security of the electric grid. They should be reassigned to the reformed and expanded CISR. End DOE/GDO's role in grid planning for the benefit of renewable developers. Under the Energy Policy Act of 2005 and IJ, DOE is to perform grid congestion studies and has authority to identify National Interest Electric Transmission Corridors, NEC. Under the Biden administration, GDO is working on a national transmission planning study and is administering $2.5 billion to support nationally significant transmission lines, increase resilience by connecting regions of the country, and improve access to cheaper clean energy sources. Defund most GDO programs. GDO oversees nearly $20 billion in new appropriations created by the IJ, including a grid modernization grant program, the Transmission Facilitation Program, and the Civil Nuclear Credit Program, among others. Congress should rescind any money not already spent. Budget: Congress appropriated $10 million for GDO in FY 2021, and DOE has requested $90.2 million for FY 2023. Office of Clean Energy Demonstration, OST. Mission/overview. The OCED was established in December 2021 to implement the IJ. Its mission is to deliver clean energy demonstration projects at scale in partnership with the private sector to accelerate deployment, market adoption, and the equitable transition to a decarbonized energy system. Needed reforms: end market distortions and stop shifting technology and development risks to taxpayers. The OCD is distorting energy markets and shifting the risk of new technology deployment from the private sector to taxpayers. The IJ provided more than $20 billion in government subsidies to help the private sector deploy and market clean energy and decarbonizing resources. Government should not be picking winners and losers and should not be subsidizing the private sector to bring resources to market. New policies: eliminate OCD. The next administration should work with Congress to eliminate all DOE energy demonstration programs, including those in OCD. Taxpayer dollars should not be used to subsidize preferred businesses and energy resources, thereby distorting the market and undermining energy reliability. Refocus on resources that will support reliability. To the extent that the various energy research and development funding authorities cannot be repealed, funded projects should be consistent with the programmatic goals of the next administration. For example, the already awarded Advanced Reactor Demonstration Program should help to move SMRs from pilot scale to commercialization and in the process address material, fuel, and regulatory issues that would pose deployment risk to utilities and Wall Street. Budget: DOE's FY 2023 budget request includes $214 million to initiate a new $150 million competition to support demonstrations that address integration issues of renewable energy into the U.S. transmission and distribution grids. Overall, the $21.5 billion provided by the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law supports several OCD programs. Advanced Reactor Demonstration Projects, $2.5 billion. Carbon Capture Large-Scale Pilot Projects, $937 million. Carbon Capture Demonstration Projects Program, $2.5 billion. Clean Energy Demonstration Program on Current and Former Mine Land, $500 million. Energy Improvements in Rural or Remote Areas, $1 billion. Industrial Demonstrations Program, $6.3 billion. Long-Duration Energy Storage Demonstrations, $505 million. Regional Clean Energy Hubs, $8 billion. Regional Direct Air Capture Hubs, $3.5 billion. Personnel: by drawing resources from across the DOE, the OCD has already grown to 70 personnel in 6 months. If OCD is eliminated, those positions can be eliminated. If OCD is reduced, its personnel can be reduced to fit its scope. Loan Program Office, LPO. Mission/overview. LPO's mission is to finance next-generation U.S. energy infrastructure, serve as a bridge to bankability for breakthrough projects and technologies, and de-risk them at early stages of investment so they can be developed at commercial scale and achieve market acceptance. The Biden administration directed the program to subsidize the administration's net zero energy transition away from conventional fuels by 2050 and to promote union jobs and domestic supply chains. The LPO coordinates with the U.S. Treasury Federal Financing Bank and is organized into 7 divisions: outreach and business development, origination, portfolio management, risk management, technical and project management, legal, and management and operation. Its loan programs were originally designed as temporary programs but have since been amended and expanded. Specifically, the IRA expanded the authority in LPO's existing programs 1703, 8EV-M, and Tribal Energy Finance by $100 billion. IRA also created the Energy Infrastructure Reinvestment (EIR) financing program 1706, which can support up to $250 billion in loan authority. The CO2 Infrastructure Finance and Innovation Act, SIFIA, authorized by the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law, appropriates $2.1 billion to support approximately $25 billion in flexible, low-interest loans. This new legislation will create jobs and wealth, address environmental justice and equity priorities, and strengthen our energy security and supply chains. Needed reforms: taxpayers should not be backing risky business ventures or politically preferred commercial enterprises. To save tax dollars and reduce current risk, the new administration should not back any new loans or loan guarantees. Should seek to sunset DOE's loan authority through Congress and eventually eliminate the Loan Program Office. DOE-backed loans and loan guarantees put taxpayers at undue risk, distort private sector investment decisions, shift private money toward projects with political support, and create additional barriers to entry for companies that are outside of the government's definition of innovative or for companies that choose not to participate. New policies: to the extent that DOE loan programs cannot be repealed, the new administration should strengthen due diligence and increase transparency in DOE loan programs. Limit the use of new loan or loan guarantee authority to projects that will promote the reliability and resilience of the electric grid and other energy infrastructure and support national security objectives. Establish clear mandatory qualifications requiring applicants to comply with the Uyghur Forced Labor Prevention Act and to certify that they are not financed with any other local, state, or federal taxpayer-backed loan, loan guarantee, or bond, such as a state green bank. Advanced Research Projects Agency, Energy, ARPA, E-Mission/Overview. ARPA-E was created in 2007 as part of the America Competes, creating opportunities to meaningfully promote excellence in technology education Act. Its statutory goals are to enhance the economic and energy security of the United States through the development of energy technologies that reduce imports of energy from foreign sources, reduce energy-related emissions, including greenhouse gases, improve the energy efficiency of all economic sectors, and ensure that the United States maintains a technological lead in developing and deploying advanced energy technologies. Some in Congress see ARPA-E as beneficial because the Competes Act provides it with more bureaucratic flexibility than other federal programs are allowed. Its goals are essentially the same as those of DOE-supplied energy offices, but its structure is different, and it is focused around individual programs instead of around offices with longer-term agendas. Needed reforms: stop risking taxpayer dollars as venture capital for the private sector. ARPA-E tends to see its mission as bringing technology from idea to commercialization. Often called the investment trough, ARPA-E is effectively funding projects that the private sector is unwilling to fund. Taxpayers should not in effect be picking winners and losers and having their dollars at risk but not gaining the economic rewards of success. End duplicative efforts. Another problem is that ARPA-E's mission is similar to the missions of DOE-supplied energy offices. If DOE-supplied energy offices are doing their jobs correctly, they will use funding opportunities announcements, prizes, lab calls, and other funding mechanisms that are needed to accomplish a specific goal. In other words, ARPA-E is at best duplicating the work done by other DOE offices. New policies: eliminate ARPA-E. The next administration should work with Congress to eliminate ARPA-E. The agency is unnecessary, risks taxpayer dollars, and interferes with risk-benefit decisions that should be made by the private sector. Budget: Congress appropriated $427 million for ARPA-E in FY 2021, and slightly more than $700 million has been requested for FY 2023. Federal Energy Management Program, FEMP Mission/Overview. The Federal Energy Management Program, FEMP, describes its mission as working with other federal agencies to meet energy-related goals, identify affordable solutions, facilitate public-private partnerships, and provide energy leadership to the country by identifying government best practices. Congress has created a number of energy and energy efficiency requirements and guidelines for federal agencies. 63 and FMP works with those agencies to help them meet their congressionally mandated goals. Needed reforms: as the world's largest single energy consumer, the federal government should use energy efficiently and cost-effectively, especially because the taxpayer is paying the energy bills. The Obama administration required the federal government to set extra statutory and aggressive goals regarding the use of renewable energy. The Trump administration took a less aggressive approach in Executive Order 13834, which specified that each agency shall prioritize actions that reduce waste, cut costs, enhance the resilience of federal infrastructure and operations, and enable more effective accomplishment of its mission. New policies: a conservative administration should follow the language of Executive Order 13834 and direct federal agencies to reduce waste, cut costs, enhance the resilience of federal infrastructure and operations, and enable more effective accomplishment of its mission. For FEMP, this means focusing on helping federal agencies to follow the law and use energy efficiently and cost-effectively. Budget: FEMP was funded at $40 million in FY 2022, $65 and slightly less than $170 million is requested for FY 2023. If it is focused on helping the federal government to carry out its statutorily based energy goal, much less money is needed. Clean Energy Corps. Mission/overview. Under the IJ, the Clean Energy Corps is charged with investing more than $62 billion to deliver a more equitable clean energy future for the American people. The Corps says that it will focus on deploying next-generation clean energy technology to help America meet its goals of a carbon-free power sector in 2035 and a decarbonized economy in 2050. Needed reforms. The Clean Energy Corps is a taxpayer-funded program to create new government jobs for employees who will work together to research, develop, demonstrate, and deploy solutions to climate change. DOE anticipates recruiting an additional 1,000 employees using a special hiring authority included in the bipartisan infrastructure law. Taxpayers should not have to fund a cadre of federal employees to promote a partisan political agenda. New policies eliminate the Clean Energy Corps by revoking funding and eliminating all positions and personnel hired under the program. Budget funding for Clean Energy Corps employees is not clearly defined in the FY 2023 DOE budget request. Energy Information Administration, EIA. Mission/overview. The U.S. Energy Information Administration collects, analyzes, and disseminates independent and impartial energy information to promote sound policymaking, efficient markets, and public understanding of energy and its interaction with the economy and the environment. Needed reforms. EIA is not an inherently problematic agency and historically has provided independent and impartial analysis. Requests for EIA analyses can be made by the administration or from members of Congress or congressional committees. EIA needs to be committed to providing unbiased forecasting and data so that policymakers, industry, and the public can have a clear understanding of our energy resources and energy economy. Strong leadership will be needed to ensure that data and reporting are not misused to promote a politicized energy transition. New policies. Clarify levelized cost of electricity. Levelized cost of electricity, LCOE, refers to the estimated revenue required to build and operate a generator over a specified cost recovery period. It is used in the National Energy Modeling System, NEMS, to compare the cost of technologies to determine which technologies are expected to be constructed in the future. Although it is useful in comparing the costs of resources over time, LCOE can also mask the massive amounts of capital needed to deploy new generation. Moreover, in the case of intermittent resources such as wind and solar, LCOE does not include the cost for backup or firming power from dispatchable resources. EIA should ensure that its reporting provides an accurate assessment of generation costs. The cost of backup power for when wind and solar resources are not available should be included when comparing the technologies and reported as a separate component in the modeling documents. Revise reserve margins. EIA, in conjunction with FERC, NERC, regional transmission organizations, RTOs, and the electric industry, should change how electric grid reserve margins are defined and calculated. In the past, reserve margins have looked at the amount of nameplate capacity on the grid to serve peak load plus a reserve. With the increasing number of intermittent, non-dispatchable resources like wind and solar, peak load and reserve margins need to be reevaluated. Reserve margins need to be timed to load changes throughout the day and consider the availability of dispatchable on-demand resources to meet load when renewables may not be available. Update reports on the impacts of federal financial interventions and subsidies. EIA's most recent report on federal financial interventions and subsidies was issued in April 2018. This is an important analysis because it clearly shows the level of the federal government's intervention in each area of the energy system for a given fiscal year. In the past, EIA performed the analysis pursuant to a request from Congress or the administration. This report should become a project that is performed annually or every other year as part of EIA's base program. Ensure the objectivity of the International Energy Outlook, IO. In the past, EIA published the IO every year. It is now published every 2 years. IO forecasts are important because the International Energy Agency's forecasts in its annual World Energy Outlook are becoming unrealistic and politically oriented to push Europe's climate goals. EIA forecasts should be based on current laws and regulations and should not be used to promote favored policies. Assess the case for privatization. There are some who think that EIA should be privatized. The cost savings to taxpayers should be considered. On the other hand, EIA has generally demonstrated neutral data presentation that is helpful to policymakers and the private sector. Budget Congress appropriated $126.8 million for IA in FY 2021, and the FY 2023 budget request is for approximately $144.5 million. Office of International Affairs, IA. Mission/Overview. The Office of International Affairs has primary responsibility for addressing international energy issues that have a direct impact on research, development, utilization, supply, and conservation of energy affecting the United States. It focuses on enhancing global energy security through countering malign influence, diversifying supplies, and increasing energy access, and is committed to increasing U.S. energy exports and trade to enhance growth. 75 needed reforms, expand IA's role, and focus its activities on U.S. international energy security interests. International energy activities should be consolidated under IA, and the Department of State's Bureau of Energy Resources should be eliminated to ensure a proper understanding of domestic energy policy and how it affects foreign policy, as well as the international energy landscape and how it affects U.S. national and economic security. Develop a strategy for identifying and accessing resources and advancing U.S. economic interests. America has recently become a net energy exporter, but it still imports large amounts of essential energy resources, such as oil and natural gas, as well as such materials as uranium, including yellowcake, lithium, certain rare earth minerals, and energy generation and transmission components and technology. The United States needs a clear understanding of its global energy and economic interests and a strategy for protecting them. Oppose climate reparations. During the November 2022 United Nations Climate Conference in Egypt, the Biden administration and other developed countries agreed to provide climate reparations to developing countries for the harm allegedly caused by the developed countries' use of fossil fuel. A reparations slush fund administered by a non-U.S. organization provides no assurance that U.S. interests will be protected and should not be supported in any form. New policies identify U.S. energy security interests and promote American energy dominance. To this end, IA should work closely with the DESA's Office of Policy on the National Energy Security Strategy. Strengthen the new DESA's vis-a-vis the Department of State. The State Department's Bureau of Energy Resources has generally excluded IA from serious discussions of international affairs to the detriment of DOE and broader interagency policy development. In addition, DOE embassy representatives are generally excluded from giving policy advice to senior diplomats and are used merely as sources of information instead of being active advocates for the Secretary's priorities. The Secretary of Energy is a senior member of the President's National Security Council and should function as such. The DOE's deputy secretaries, undersecretaries, and assistant secretaries should be guaranteed representation at all deputies and policy coordination committee meetings. In addition, senior political and career staff should hold positions on the NSC staff equivalent to their counterparts at State, Defense, Treasury, and the intelligence community, IC. DESA's billets should replace State Department Bureau of Energy Resources billets at the relevant posts worldwide. Stop climate reparations. The President should refuse to provide climate reparations under an unratified treaty, and IA should encourage other countries to reconsider their desire to provide reparations. Arctic Energy Office, AE. Mission/Overview. AE was established during the Trump administration to create a central office overseeing U.S. Arctic interests in Alaska and the other Arctic nations in response to the growing strategic sensitivity of this geographic region and the natural resources it contains. It serves as the principal advisor to the Undersecretary on all domestic Arctic issues, including energy, science, and national security. Needed reforms. In October 2022, the Biden administration released its national strategy for the Arctic region. Although recognizing national security threats in the Arctic, it also focuses heavily on climate change, sustainability, and international cooperation. The United States must establish a strategic plan to promote its national security, energy, and economic interests in the Arctic. An analysis and plan to support the responsible development of Alaska's energy assets should be a priority. New policies defend American interests in the Arctic Circle. The next administration needs to define American strategic and economic interests in the Arctic Circle. AE should help to identify those interests, as well as threats posed by countries like Russia and China, and develop appropriate policy options for the President's consideration. Ensure that AE is clearly focused. In particular, this means identifying U.S. energy interests in the Arctic Circle, identifying foreign government and commercial interests and activity in the region, and ensuring that the United States does not forego important energy and national security interests in the Arctic. Expand AE's operations in Alaska. AE's operations in Alaska should be expanded to encompass broader national energy security interests in the region, including rare earths, oil, and natural gas. AE should also be the lead for DOE Antarctic operations as a counter to growing Russian and Chinese interest in Antarctic resources. Personnel. AE should provide a senior Arctic energy official to the U.S. Arctic Council delegation in recognition of the key role that energy plays in Arctic development. Office of Intelligence and Counterintelligence, IAC Mission/Overview. DOE's Office of Intelligence and Counterintelligence is responsible for all intelligence and counterintelligence activities throughout the DOE complex. including nearly 30 intelligence and counterintelligence offices nationwide. It leverages the Energy Department's unmatched scientific and technological expertise in support of policymakers, as well as national security missions in defense, homeland security, cybersecurity, intelligence, and energy security, and is a member of the U.S. intelligence community. Needed reforms. Robust security protocols are necessary to protect DOE technology and innovations from foreign penetration and espionage. In addition, DOE's general isolation from the rest of the intelligence community prevents appropriately cleared senior staff from getting the thorough issue briefings that their colleagues elsewhere in the national security realm receive. New policies. Improve accountability and utilization. IAC should be led by a qualified appointee and report directly to the Secretary and Deputy Secretary. IAC will require strong political leadership, which means finding an appointee with an IC background. In addition, upgrading the new DSS's general security posture would require the Secretary's direct intervention to improve protocols and access the necessary resources from the rest of the IC. This would not be achievable at a lower level. Office of Policy, OP Mission/Overview. OP has taken various roles over different administrations. During the Obama administration, OP was a large office and was tasked with drafting the Quadrennial Energy Review, QR. The Trump administration shut down the QR and gave OP a leaner research and advisory role. Under the Biden DOE, OP appears to be focused on preparing reports on climate change and renewables. Needed reforms. Help to develop policy. Because the appointees running DOE's various program offices are properly focused on managing their programs, not enough thought is given to identifying future challenges and developing potential solutions to benefit the American people. Help to ensure that policies are properly implemented. Policy initiatives from the Secretary are often understood or implemented inconsistently by program offices. OP can help the Secretary to ensure that important policy initiatives are implemented, particularly when they involve multiple program offices. New policies. Develop a national energy security strategy. OP could be tasked with developing a national energy security strategy for the Secretary. This strategy could be prepared in conjunction with the White House National Security Strategy and the DoD National Defense Strategy to convey these priorities to Congress and design policy initiatives for their implementation. Such a strategy could summarize cyber and physical threats to energy infrastructure, challenges involved in obtaining rare earth minerals to support domestic energy production and consumption, and foreign actions that threaten U.S. energy security and dominance. However, it would be important to guard against attempts to transform the strategy into a government-led industrial policy or, in a progressive administration, an economy-wide climate policy. Office of Technology Transitions, OTT. Mission/Overview. The Secretary of Energy authorized the creation of this office in 2015. Its mission is to expand the public impact of the department's research, development, demonstration, and deployment (RDD&D) portfolio to advance the economic, energy, and national security interests of the nation. OTT serves as the front door to U.S. Department of Energy's products, facilities, and expertise, and integrates MarketPoll into its planning to ensure the greatest return on investment from DOE's RDD&D activities to the taxpayer. Needed reforms. OTT should ensure that the best emerging technologies from DOE and the national labs are properly supported and protected. Because America's technological edge is a key national security asset, and in view of China's predatory thefts of intellectual property, OTT should ensure that R&D funds are used for projects that protect and advance that edge. Ensure that successful advances, with a focus on new natural resource development technologies, artificial intelligence, cybersecurity, and space, are transferred swiftly to American interests in the private sector. New policies. Focus on benefits to Americans. OTT's operations should be based on the recognition that the new technologies generated by American taxpayers' investment in DOE are a significant national security asset rather than some neutral scientific gift to humanity. Increase oversight and coordination. OTT needs to be vigilant in overseeing and coordinating OTT offices associated with each national lab. For security and economic espionage reasons, the work funded by the American people needs to be protected, and when commercialized, it needs to go to American businesses. Office of Science, SC. Mission/Overview. The Office of Science, SC, supports and oversees research facilities and programs that cover basic science through its application to the demonstration and deployment of energy technologies. SC oversees 10 of the 17 DOE national labs and 28 major federal research user facilities. Its mission is to preserve U.S. leadership in science, fund and perform basic research, and provide the scientific facilities that the private sector is unable or unwilling to provide. New initiatives include quantum information sciences and artificial intelligence. SC is led by a Senate-confirmed director at the Assistant Secretary level and has 8 program offices. Needed reforms. The next conservative president should commit the United States to scientific dominance to support national and economic security, especially in light of similar efforts by China. To aid in this effort, the Office of Science should return to its primary mission, nonpartisan and basic science. SC's mission should be international leadership in basic and early applied science and provision of world-leading facilities for this work. The Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act and Inflation Reduction Act mark the major reorientation of DOE primarily from defense applications in the NSA and basic and early applied science across SC and the applied offices to a massive federal research, development, demonstration, and commercialization body. Distraction from SC's basic science mission should be prevented. Increase the level of accountability. The national laboratories need to be more directly accountable to the Secretary of Energy and Congress for their work and management. New policies commit to U.S. science dominance. The United States is losing its dominance in scientific discoveries and technological development. China and other adversaries have been stealing American science and technology for years and are now on the verge of dominating science, a development that is fraught with negative strategic and economic implications for the United States. The next administration must commit itself to ensuring that the U.S. continues to dominate scientific discovery and technological advancement. Refocus on mission and eliminate duplication and waste. The administration should work with Congress to rationalize the national lab network to meet specific national objectives, such as the NNSA laboratory's role in national defense, and conduct basic research that the private sector would not otherwise conduct. Activities that duplicate those of other government agencies or the private sector should be eliminated. Properly manage the national lab's contributions to the private sector. SC should improve private sector access to the national labs through programs like the GAIN voucher program and consistent with national security considerations, while ensuring that the economic benefits of taxpayer-funded technologies flow back to taxpayers through patent review sharing or a revolving fund. Budget. The Office of Science was appropriated slightly more than $7 billion in FY 2021, and DOE requested slightly less than $7.8 billion for FY 2023. Office of Environmental Management, M. Mission/overview. The Office of Environmental Management's mission is to complete the safe cleanup of the environmental legacy resulting from decades of nuclear weapons development and government-sponsored nuclear energy research. Its cleanup program is the world's largest, and EM reports that 92 of 107 sites have been completed. According to the U.S. Government Accountability Office, DOE is responsible for the largest share of the federal government's environmental liability, about 85% in fiscal year 2020. Since 2011, EM has spent a cumulative total of $63.2 billion, and its liability has grown by $243 billion. It is currently projected that cleanup will take another 70 years, FY 2022 to FY 2091. Projected low-range and high-range life cycle costs total slightly less than $652.4 billion and slightly more than $887.2 billion, respectively. Needed reforms. Some states and contractors see EM as a jobs program and have little interest in accelerating the cleanup. EM needs to move to an expeditious program with targets for cleanup of sites. The Hanford site in Washington state is a particular challenge. The Tri-Party Agreement, TPA, among DOE, the Environmental Protection Agency, and Washington State's Department of Ecology has hampered attempts to accelerate and innovate the cleanup. A central challenge at Hanford is the classification of radioactive waste. High-level waste, HLW, and low-level waste, LLW, classifications drive the remediation and disposal process. Under President Trump, significant changes in waste classification from HLW to LLW enabled significant progress on remediation. Implementation needs to continue across the complex, particularly at Hanford. New policies. The next administration should accelerate the cleanup. This means that a comprehensive cost projection and schedule reflecting the entire scope of the job should be developed and appropriate reforms should be instituted. To save taxpayers a potential $500 billion over the long run and reduce current risk, a 10-year program to complete all sites by 2035, except Hanford with a target date of 2060, should be considered. Such a commitment will require increased funding for EM during those accelerated periods. To the extent that funding from the IJ and IRA cannot be repealed, requests to divert those funds to EM's cleanup obligations should be considered. Fully implement high-level waste determination. Fully adopting the high-level waste, HLW, determination across the DOE complex, particularly at Hanford, would allow LLW to be grouted rather than vitrified. Increase the use of commercial waste disposal. Using commercial disposal would reduce capital costs, $2 billion, for new disposal sites to accelerate cleanup and reduce local post-cleanup environmental liability at multiple sites. Revisit the Hanford cleanup's regulatory framework. Hanford poses significant political and legal challenges with the state of Washington, and DOE will have to work with Congress to make progress in accelerating cleanup at that site. DOE and EPA need to work more closely to coordinate their responses to claims made under the TPA and work more aggressively for changes, including congressional action if necessary, to achieve workable cleanup goals. Establish more direct leadership and accountability to the Deputy Secretary consistent with Government Accountability Office recommendations. Change environmental management's culture to promote innovation and completion. Budget environmental management received slightly less than $7.6 billion in FY 2021, and its budget request for FY 2023 is approximately $8 billion. The additional funding necessary to accelerate closure of the program will need to be considered as part of a broader government-wide discussion about yearly appropriations. Office of Civilian Radioactive Waste Management, OCRWM, currently Office of Spent Fuel and Waste Disposition Mission/Overview, the Nuclear Waste Policy Act, NWPA, of 1982 conferred the responsibility for commercial nuclear waste disposal on the federal government, 93, and in 2002, Congress designated a single repository located at Yucca Mountain in Nevada as the National Repository Site. The act also established the Office of Civilian Radioactive Waste Management, OCRWM. The Obama administration shut down OCRWM in 2010. The Office of Spent Fuel and Waste Disposition, which is headed by a non-confirmed Deputy Assistant Secretary in the Office of Nuclear Energy, is currently responsible for the management of nuclear waste, and interim disposal is taking place on various sites. Providing a plan for the proper disposal of civilian nuclear waste is essential to the promotion of nuclear power in the United States. Needed reforms. Work with the Nuclear Regulatory Commission as it reviews DOE's permit application for Yucca Mountain. According to both the scientific community and global experience, deep geologic storage is critical to any plan for the proper disposal of more than 75 years of defense waste and 80,000 tons of commercial spent nuclear fuel. Yucca Mountain remains a viable option for waste management, and DOE should recommit to working with the Nuclear Regulatory Commission as it reviews DOE's permit application for a repository. Finishing the review does not mean that Yucca Mountain will be completed and operational. It merely presents all the information for the state of Nevada, Congress, the nuclear industry, and the administration to use as the basis for informed decisions. Reform the licensing process. The reactor licensing process is inadequate. Fixing nuclear waste management will require wholesale reform that realigns responsibilities, resets incentives, and introduces market forces without creating chaos within the current nuclear industry that has been built around the current system. Produce concrete outcomes from consent-based siting. Beginning in the Obama administration and resurrected during the Biden administration, consent-based siting for a civilian waste nuclear repository has been a way to delay any politically painful decisions about siting a permanent civilian nuclear waste facility. In 2022, DOE announced $16 million to support local communities in consent-based siting. The next administration should use the consent-based siting process to identify and build temporary or permanent sites for a civilian waste nuclear repository or repositories. New policies. Restart Yucca Mountain licensing. DOE should restart the Yucca Mountain licensing process. Any continuation of interim storage facilities should be made part of an integrated waste management system that includes geologic storage. Further, building on the consent-based siting process already underway, DOE should find a second repository site. Fix the policy and cost drivers that are preventing nuclear storage. The federal government continues to hold $46 billion in the Nuclear Waste Fund, NWF, 98 funded by utilities and their ratepayers for permanent disposal of nuclear waste. However, no such storage exists and spent nuclear fuel remains on site at most nuclear plants. Meanwhile, Congress uses those funds to finance unrelated spending. Moreover, DOE's violation of its contractual obligation to take the waste has resulted in the payment of approximately $10.1 billion in settlements and judgments to contract holders. Develop new NWF funding and accounting mechanisms that allow licensed nuclear operators to guarantee resources for future nuclear waste disposal while also maintaining control of those resources. Reconstitute OCRWM. OCRWM, as already established by statute, should be tasked with developing the next steps on Yucca Mountain and nuclear waste management. These steps should include initiating market reforms, including significant amendments to the NWPA to allow additional industry responsibility for managing waste, market pricing, and competition for waste services, and the opportunity for Nevadans to have more partnership involvement with any nuclear facility at Yucca Mountain. Re-establish, consistent with the Nuclear Waste Policy Act, the position of Director of the Office of Civilian Radioactive Waste Management. Budget within the Office of Nuclear Energy budget, approximately $100 million is set aside for fuel cycle and waste management activities. These funds should be transferred to the newly established OCRWM, which should also be responsible for managing the Nuclear Waste Fund and given access to the fund as necessary to carry out its responsibilities. National Nuclear Security Administration, NNSA. Mission/Overview. NNSA's primary mission is to provide and maintain a modern, safe, and effective nuclear deterrent for the United States. This includes the design and production of nuclear warheads, their integration with delivery systems, and their safe storage and decommissioning. NNSA's responsibilities also include developing nuclear reactors for the U.S. Navy and work, ING, to prevent nuclear weapon proliferation and reduce the threat of nuclear and radiological terrorism around the world. NNSA was established by the NNSA Act, which also defines its authority. Needed reforms. The United States, through the NNSA, needs to make the design, development, and deployment of new nuclear warheads a top priority. Existing warheads were designed and built during the Cold War, and the U.S. lacks sufficient plutonium production capabilities. Because this process will take time, NNSA and the NNSA labs need to ensure that existing nuclear warheads are viable and provide an appropriate strategic deterrent. New policies, the expansion of Chinese nuclear forces, the continued nuclear threat from Russia, and active nuclear programs in North Korea, Iran, and elsewhere require NNSA's recommitment to the nuclear mission. A conservative administration should continue to develop new warheads for each branch of the triad, land, sea, and air defenses. If possible, reverse the Biden administration's decision to retire the B-83 bomb in order to maintain 2 aircraft-delivered warheads, and its decision to cancel the Submarine-Launched Cruise Missile, SLCM. Also undertake an evaluation of the need for nuclear anti-submarine and air defense weapons in light of emerging threats. Maintain 2 production sites for plutonium pits, a key element of warhead production, at Los Alamos and Savannah River. Reject ratification of the Comprehensive Test Ban Treaty and indicate a willingness to conduct nuclear tests in response to adversary nuclear developments if necessary. This will require that NNSA be directed to move to immediate test readiness to give the administration maximum flexibility in responding to adversary actions. Review all new Navy, Department of Homeland Security, and U.S. Department of Transportation Maritime Administration construction programs. The review should be conducted by the Director of Naval Reactors, DNR, with an eye to the possible inclusion of advanced affordable nuclear reactor technology and extension of DNR authority over these agencies' nuclear construction programs. Review the non-national security portfolios at the Los Alamos, Lawrence Livermore, and Sandia labs and identify divestments to focus on nuclear deterrence. Los Alamos, Lawrence Livermore, and Sandia provide unique capabilities for nuclear deterrence, and each lab maintains extensive non-national security research programs and commercial activities. Review the operations of the Nuclear Weapons Council, NWC. The statutorily established NWC is required to report to the President and Congress, but needs to refocus its efforts on providing comprehensive oversight of DOE and DoD nuclear weapons policy and requirements. Budget concurrent modernization of the nuclear triad and its warheads will be a major challenge to the DoD and DOE budgets over the coming decade. DOE non-nuclear programs should be the first source of additional resources for NNSA activities. Divestment of non-nuclear activities from NNSA laboratories can address some overhead and operational costs. NNSA received $19.7 billion in 2021, and its FY 2023 budget request was $21.4 billion. The next administration should ensure that funding is targeted to the accelerated development of new warheads. Personnel NNSA has tended to act as though it is not part of DOE and has resisted oversight by the Secretary of Energy. The NNSA Act grants some autonomy to the NNSA, but it also makes it clear that NNSA is under the authority of the Secretary. NNSA's leaders need to understand that ultimately, they report to the Secretary. FERC, Electric Reliability and Resilience. Mission/Overview. The Federal Power Act tasks FERC, along with the FERC-designated North American Electric Reliability Corporation, NERC, with promoting the reliability of the bulk power system, the transmission and generation needed to power the electric grid. NERC develops technical standards, and FERC adopts them as mandatory standards, including cybersecurity standards, with which transmission providers, generators, and utilities must comply. Under the Federal Power Act, critical electric infrastructure security and issues like electromagnetic pulse, EMP, are addressed by both FERC and DOE. In addition, the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act directed FERC to establish incentive-based rate treatments by encouraging utilities to invest in advanced cybersecurity technology and participate in cybersecurity threat information sharing programs. Needed reforms. There is a growing problem with the electric grid's reliability because of the increasing growth of subsidized intermittent renewable generation, like wind and solar, and a lack of dispatchable generation, for example, power plants powered by natural gas, nuclear, and coal, especially during hot and cold weather. FERC and NERC have been studying the potential for generation shortages across the nation in the summer and winter. Cyber and physical attacks also threaten the grid. Specific areas for reform include the following. Limit the impact of subsidized renewables on price formation. Subsidized renewable resources are undermining electric reliability in RTOs. The increase in subsidized, intermittent resources is undermining the ability of RTOs' pricing models to support the reliable dispatchable generation that is needed to serve the grid at all times. Reform the application of reserve margins. Reserve margins have become largely meaningless. Traditionally, the electric industry has used reserve margins to ensure that the grid has enough power plants to guarantee reliability. Generally, reserve margins represent the amount of generation available, power plants, to meet peak electric demand, the time of day and year when people are using the most electricity, plus a percentage of additional generation for backup. However, given the increasing number of intermittent resources, like solar, which may be available during the heat of the day but disappears as the sun sets, other dispatchable generation needs to be available to meet customers' electricity requirements. Therefore, the definitions and calculations of reserve margins and peak load need to be updated to focus on the modern grid's reliability challenges for all times of the day and year. Recognize the interdependence of electric generation and natural gas. The interdependence of electric generation and natural gas pipelines continues to grow. Given natural gas's important role in generating electricity, especially as backup when renewables are not available, lack of natural gas pipelines or attacks on existing pipelines could threaten our ability to generate electricity. Expand resource diversity and reliability. Resource diversity is needed to support grid reliability. Pressure to use 100% renewables or non-carbon-emitting resources threatens the electric grid's reliability. A grid that has access to dispatchable resources such as coal, nuclear, and natural gas for generating power is inherently more reliable and resilient. Protect against cyber and physical attacks. The threat of cyber and physical attacks on electric infrastructure by foreign actors like China, Russia, North Korea, and Iran, as well as terrorists, continues to grow. The attacks with guns on substations in North Carolina in December 2022 that left customers without power demonstrate the grid's vulnerability. New policies reform RTOs to require reliability. FERC should direct RTOs to establish reliability pricing for eligible dispatchable generation resources or require intermittent resources to procure backup power for times when they are not available to operate. In addition, Congress should repeal subsidies for generation resources. Update the definition and calculation of reserve margins to support reliability. FERC, NERC, and DOE should revise the definition of reserve margins to ensure the grid's reliability throughout the day and the year. This will mean recognizing that reserve margins may need to consider net peak and exclude non-dispatchable resources from inclusion in reserve margin calculations. Expand and protect natural gas infrastructure in support of electric generation. FERC needs to ensure that its consideration of natural gas pipeline applications recognizes the role that natural gas plays in electric reliability. FERC also needs to make sure that RTO pricing mechanisms support generators that need to contract for natural gas service on a firm basis. Support resource diversity and reliability. FERC, NERC, and DOE play key roles in balancing consumer, industrial, and national defense interests to ensure an ongoing reliable, plentiful, and accessible national electricity supply. NERC reliability reviews and FERC's reliability roles should be aware that over-reliance on any one power generation fuel source entails concurrent cost and availability risk. FERC should reform market rules that unduly discriminate against dispatchable resources needed for reliability. Strengthen security against cyber and physical threats. FERC and NERC need to enhance the security of the bulk power system by, for example, banning Chinese-made components, investing in transformers, and hardening substations and other critical infrastructure. DOE should play a leading role in identifying and addressing threats to the grid. FERC, RTOS/ISOs, and electric power markets. Mission/overview. For more than 20 years, FERC has issued regulations and directed policies for the creation and operation of regional transmission organizations, RTOs, and independent system operators, ISOs, to manage the dispatch of generation and transmission of electricity. Under the misnomer electric power markets, these regulatory constructs use marginal price clearing auctions, in some cases both hourly day-ahead auctions and 5-minute day-of-need auctions, and locational marginal pricing to procure electric generation and set prices to meet the needs of the grid. Some RTOs also have capacity auctions. Of the nation's 7 RTOs, 6 are subject to FERC jurisdiction, but not ERCOT in Texas. Areas without an RTO include the Southeast and portions of the West, although California is in an RTO. Needed reforms. Too many conservatives have assumed that because RTOs are described as electric power markets, market forces of supply and demand set electric prices and benefit customers. RTOs are complex regulatory constructs with rules set by FERC that obscure government interference and preferences for preferred resources. Furthermore, government preferences and subsidies for resources like wind and solar distort price formation for electricity that is undermining the reliability of the grid. Finally, customers are not seeing the full economic benefits that non-fuel, subsidized resources should provide. Additionally, electric reliability is threatened in many RTOs. As subsidized renewables, like wind and solar receiving tax credits and state renewable portfolio standards, RPS, programs have disrupted market functions, price distortions have driven out reliable, dispatchable resources like coal, natural gas, and nuclear generation in various RTOs. The result, electric reliability is decreasing in many parts of the country. As noted, FERC and NERC have been studying the potential for summer and winter shortages. RTOs are not providing the full economic benefits of renewables to customers. Because RTOs use marginal price auctions where natural gas usually sets the clearing price paid to all generators, the economic benefits of renewables, no fuel, tax credits, etc., are flowing mainly to renewables investors and not to customers, although customers do benefit from some decrease in marginal costs. Yet reliability is decreasing, so customers are getting the worst of both worlds, paying more for electricity and having less reliability for the money. Big Green and Big Tech want RTO expansion. Renewable developers, large industrial users, and big tech tend to want RTO expansion for their own economic and ESG reasons. These entities can benefit economically from the complexity and marginal pricing regime of the RTOs. Increased costs and reliability problems are often shifted to other customers. Unlike vertically integrated utilities that are accountable to state elected officials and state public utility commissions, RTOs and their participants are accountable only to FERC. Even then, however, accountability is indirect through the tariffs, rules, that the RTOs adopt and FERC approves. In addition, unlike utilities, generators in an RTO have no obligation to serve customers. New policies FERC must make reliability of the grid and service to end-use top priorities. To do so, it should re-examine the premise of RTOs. RTOs no longer seem to work for the benefit of the American people. Marginal price auctions for energy are not ensuring the reliability of the grid and are not passing the full economic benefits of subsidized renewables onto customers. FERC needs to re-examine the RTOs under its jurisdiction to make sure that they procure reliable and affordable electricity for the benefit of the American people. Ensure that RTOs return to market fundamentals so that they serve customers, not special interests and political causes. FERC should require RTOs to ensure that reliable, dispatchable resources are properly valued to provide electricity when needed for the benefit of customers. Potential reforms could include 1. Requiring renewable generators to provide intraday backup by dispatchable on-demand generation so that bids by intermittent resources into RTOs equate fairly with far more valuable on-demand dispatchable resources. 2. Creating dual energy markets for dispatchable and non-dispatchable resources. Or 3. Eliminating capacity markets where intermittent resources participate and instead establishing reliability markets where dispatchable on-demand resources participate. Alternatives to marginal price auctions also should be considered. Direct the RTOs to ensure that the economic benefits of renewables, like tax credits and no fuel costs, are passed on to customers. End undue discrimination that allows subsidized resources to distort price formation in RTOs. Affirm its commitment that states will decide whether to join an RTO instead of imposing RTOs on regions that do not want them. FERC should also consider allowing states to enter into non-RTO power pools with alternative structures for the sharing of resources and electric generation. End hour 13.